So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our side event today. I'm Rachel Weinberg. I'm based at the University of Cape Town, and I'm one of the Seed and Knowledge Initiative partners supporting this event. And really, I mean, what always strikes me, I think, about these meetings is the disconnect between what happens on the ground and then what happens in sort of negotiations of multilateral agreements like the international treaty, both ways. I think there's such a disconnect often between the two, and this event is aiming to bridge a little bit of that gap. And in fact, for many years, the farmer-based organizations that we work with, that we'll hear about tonight, haven't even really used the language of farmers' rights, despite the many ways that we are working with implementing farmers' rights, for example, through protecting farmers' varieties and land races, through promoting local knowledge, traditional knowledge and practices and cultures, through working with participatory plant breeding, through advocating for rights around legal changes, and supporting community agrobiodiversity management, for example, through community seed banks. And at the same time, I think sitting here in Rome feels quite far removed from the realities which many farmers face across the world. But the experiences we want to bring to you today are from Southern Africa. And we want to try and showcase some of the work that's being done by farmers and by NGOs in Southern Africa towards realizing different aspects of farmers' rights, and then to stimulate discussion in the short time that we've got today. So I'm going to hand over shortly to Steph Orban, who's from the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, or SKY, not SKI, Secretariat. But before that, I just wanted to briefly share a short snippet from a very remarkable series of events that took place over the last year, which was part of a campaign that we launched called Our Seeds, Our Rights, Our Lives. And it involved several hundred small-scale farmers who gathered across Southern Africa in a caravan, in a virtual caravan, that moved across the region from Mzuzu in Malawi to Chikankata, Chimanimani in the Eastern Highlands of Zimbabwe, to Mtuba in northern KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and through fairs and markets and festivals and dialogues, farmers from Malawi, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, and from South Africa got together to affirm the rights that they have to their traditional seed, their knowledge, their culture, heritage, land, and associated life systems. So, and this was really just to make clear the call that they had to better respect and recognize and uphold the implementation of farmers' rights in Southern Africa. And these events were part of the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, which Steph is going to introduce. But I wanted to, to just briefly give you a flavor. No? This was just a small group of farmers representing the many hundreds who gathered in Zambia to carry some of the messages forward into the seminar that we held. And some of those messages were conveyed day before yesterday in the plenary. So I just hope it gives you a sort of a slight feel for what a very, very wonderful event that we experienced there. Over to you, Steph.
Thanks, Rachel. So my name is Stéphanie Aubin, and I'm the SKY Regional Program Officer based in South Africa. So I'm going to introduce the Seed and Knowledge Initiative very briefly. So the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, also known as SKY or SKI, but not SKI, as Rachel said, is a dynamic partnership of diverse Southern African organizations committed to securing food sovereignty And we believe that seed sovereignty is the basis of food sovereignty. We work with smallholder farmers to become more seed, food, and nutritionally secure through strengthened farmer-led seed systems, improve crop diversity in the broader framework of agroecology, and the revival and strengthening of local knowledge systems. The initiative started in 2013 and has since grown to include 15 partner organizations across 4 Southern African countries: Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. And as I said earlier, these partners are very diverse in nature, including community-based organizations and farmer organizations, local NGOs, national networks, and research institutions. And this diversity really brings complementary strength in the partnership. You can see all the partners and where they're based on the map that is projected on the screen. And to know more about each one of them and about our Sky and Knowledge Initiative, I would invite you to visit our website. I hope the link is visible, but it's seedandknowledge.org. As Sky collectively and Sky partners individually, we see ourselves as part of the regional and global movement for food sovereignty, agroecology, and climate justice that has emerged in response to the multiple crises of our times, which governments keep failing to address. And what we do first and foremost is to initiate spaces for learning, reflection, and innovation towards change and sustainable social and environmental impact. So we start at the grassroots level through the partners to enable and support farming communities to take a leadership role in developing and implementing solutions. We also have a vibrant community of practice that is open to any interested practitioners on issues relating to farmer seeds and agroecology. And to date, we have more than 50 members in our community of practice. And last but not least, we collaborate and coordinate to collectively engage in advocacy at all the local, national, regional, international levels to bring Southern African farmers' experiences and insights to the various relevant policy spaces at these levels. For us, our contribution to movement building is a key strategy for creating long-term systemic change that mobilizes communities, decision makers, and all the other relevant stakeholders, but also resources and public perception. But while we have relationship with a number of organizations and individuals all over the world, once again, our primary stakeholders and partners really are the smallholder farmers we work with in Malawi, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Thank you. And back to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you for a great overview of Sky. So I'm going to hand over now to Brittany Kesselman. Brittany is based at the University of Cape Town, where she works on agroecology and the intersection of agroecology and traditional knowledge, but also looking at how food systems in the region can be decolonized. And she's got a very rich background working on food sovereignty questions. But for this presentation, she's drawing on the multiple experiences within Sky, using seed and food festivals as a mechanism to affirm farmers' rights. Over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Good evening, everyone. As she said, I'll be speaking about seed and food. Sometimes we say fairs, sometimes we say festivals as an approach to affirming farmers' rights. And I would like to just start with a little video as well to give you a sense of what these are like. This is from a recent festival in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. So you can see it's a very joyful and celebratory occasion, a bit removed from the feeling on the floor downstairs, or upstairs, I suppose. So our partners, the organizations and farmers, have different objectives in organizing seed and food festivals. And of course, sharing knowledge between farmers is critical in any festival, but some of the other objectives can differ. So raising awareness of the value of traditional seeds and foods amongst the broader community, is often very important. Influencing decision makers, these are advocacy opportunities. Celebrating traditional food and culture, which is increasingly being lost in the face of pressure from the industrial food system. And that goes also with reviving the traditions and customs around food. Encouraging intergenerational knowledge transfer, which is critical to maintaining traditional food and culture, and then also building community. So depending on which objectives partners and farmers have in organizing their festivals, then there are a huge range of different activities that can happen over the course of one day or several days. Sometimes there are specific events and activities for different groups of stakeholders. So farmer dialogues and workshops are very important for the knowledge sharing portion. Also, sometimes there's scheduled engagement with decision makers in the form of workshops where farmers can present their needs and views directly to policymakers. Also, of course, the seed displays and exchange, which are at the heart of a seed fair. And then demonstrations of things like harvesting and processing, and then also of cooking with tastings and competitions as well. So you can watch the entire chain from seed to plate. Traditional songs, dances, and theater as part of the cultural revival aspect, which is what you see in this photo here, a traditional dance. And then as well, speeches by dignitaries, tours and site visits where you leave the festival area and visit either farms to see agroecological practice around seed in action, or sometimes to sacred sites, which are often linked to the traditional foods and crops because they use the traditional crops in offerings, rituals, and ceremonies at sacred sites. Competitions and giving of prizes around seed saving is also quite important. Activities for children, which is part of the intergenerational knowledge transfer and ensuring that the next generation is interested. And then increasingly, especially since COVID, online activities. So this can be streaming events from the festival, but also our partners in Zimbabwe in recent years have been placing increasing amounts of material online before the festival to build excitement in the time leading up to the festival by going to visit the farms of participating farmers and doing other activities in advance. So if we're looking at how this contributes to farmers' rights, and we think about the most critical right to save, use, exchange, and sell seed, there's a number of ways that the fairs and festivals contribute to that. And one is very simply by increasing farmers' access to traditional seeds. Many of these seeds have been lost or are very scarce and difficult to find. They're definitely not available through commercial channels. And so at the seed and food fairs, farmers are able to access and exchange these seeds in a way that they couldn't otherwise. Also, the knowledge sharing that happens around using the seeds, selection, multiplication, traditional ways of storage, and so forth, is very important for increasing farmers' capacity to actually save and use traditional seeds, since they tend to be different from what they may have been accessing in a commercial sector. And then it demonstrates the vibrancy and viability of farmer-led seed systems, which, as we know, are largely invisible both in policy and in mainstream discourse around food and seed. So it helps very much for communities and policymakers to actually see that these systems exist and that they're thriving. And that in turn increases farmers' confidence in their seeds and seed systems, which they need in order to be able to continue in those systems and resist the pressure to switch to hybrid or GMO seeds that they often face from extension officers and others. And then finally, a place for the actual exchange and sale of seeds, which of course is very critical to be able to exercise this right, although in some cases it's illegal for them to do so. And then a second important aspect of farmers' rights, of course, is that they deserve recognition and support for the way they have been custodians of plant genetic resources. And so, of course, there are immediate benefits at fairs and festivals in terms of getting more seeds and potentially income from sale, but also recognition of their role because it's a celebration, as you saw in the video, and rewards through contests and prizes. And then the increase in support can be somewhat indirect, but when government officials are present at fairs, it can help them see the need to support these systems. For example, extension officers have seen at festivals in Zimbabwe that these systems deserve more of their support. Or here is a picture from the National Gene Bank in Malawi at one of the seed and food festivals where they were exchanging seed as well, or collecting. And finally, the right to participate in decision-making. So again, the visibility. Policymakers won't protect a seed system that they don't know exists. And then also advocacy, whether it's scheduled in specific workshops and dialogues or whether it's unscheduled and just happening in casual engagements with policymakers. And this can be also with traditional leaders in a Southern African context who can also influence the food and seed system. And finally, educational workshops. The festival that you saw with the singing and dancing also involved a session on changing seed laws and what that would mean for farmers and how they might want to mobilize around that. So those are some of the key points.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm also reminded of a seed fair that took place within South Africa's parliament a few years ago, which was so powerful because it invoked the memory of parliamentarians who were mostly urban-based of their sort of rural childhoods, and really was such an important trigger to switch thinking. Thank you. We've got time for one or two questions. I think it's better to take questions after each session, or after each presentation, rather than leaving it to the end. So let's have one or two specific questions for each presenter, and then at the end we can open up for a more general discussion. So I don't know if there are any particular questions. Yes.
Thank you for. Yeah, I want to appreciate the two presenters. And for the last presenter, I'm really curious to understand the exchange of seed materials. Is it, do they also exchange planting materials like for banana, yams, and whatever? And if so, who is assisting them in cleaning these materials to make sure that there is they don't carry diseases from one area to another? Thank you.
I'll start to answer, but if any other people on the panel want to answer, please feel free. Yes, there's exchange of also, we don't really have a lot of banana, although there are some. Sorry, amongst all of us, yes, there's banana. Also cassava, yams, and so forth. The farmers generally are supported in the entire process by the partner organizations in Sky. And so some of the capacity building that they receive is around the preparation and saving of the seeds and planting materials. So then they do that themselves. Most of the festivals are quite local, so it's not a matter of moving diseases very far, although in some cases people do come from further away to the festivals. I'd say the majority of the material exchange is more likely to be seeds just because it's easier to move. But yes, there's both.
Just to add to what Brittany has said, farmers also share potato vines, like in Marawa, in Kombezi Community Seed Bank. But these vines are stored in what we call a field gene bank. So farmers can share the knowledge about these vines, and they can identify the materials that they can correct. But then they have to collect the vines from the field, because if you keep them too long, then they will dry up and then compromise their viability. Yeah, thank
you. Yeah, I can also say is in some of the countries, especially in Zimbabwe, the extension services, the government extension services and seed services are involved in those seed fairs and seed festivals. And they actually take the opportunity to do that work of testing the quality and checking. And this is also where the competition comes in, to reward the best quality seed. So yeah, we work with local government services on this. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to add that in the partnership, there's also strong collaboration with other actors that are working on seed. So I think what Brittany was presenting is a dissemination measure, but beyond that, we work with breeders, research institution, academia to make sure that some of the issues around disease, around sometimes quality are tackled by these institutions. But the collaboration really is also to strengthen and link the gap between indigenous knowledge and the scientific knowledge that is with the researchers and the farmers.
Thank you, Juliet. I think I'm going to move on to Juliet. I can see a hand there, but perhaps you could save it for after Juliet, because it's a nice segue to your input, because Juliet's she calls herself a master trainer, and I think she really is a master trainer in participatory plant breeding. She's based at the Community Technology Development Trust in Zambia, Juliet Nangamba, and I think has a very strong focus on how we shift research to become much more farmer-led. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Please, even if I'm a master trainer in participatory research, don't ask me too many questions, huh? Okay, so my name is Juliet Nangamba. I work with the Community Technology Development Trust in Zambia, and I'm going to share on how we are realizing farmers' rights through farmer-centered research. I think we're all here because we're talking about plant genetic resources, and these resources are really the foundation of seed and food systems. At the center of continuing this diversity, the conservation, and the sustainable use, it is the women who are the true guardians of diversity and are the custodian of this diversity. And without our plant genetic resources, we would face a disruption in seed and food systems and a total human collapse. So why then farmer-centered research? So really what we've been trying to do and what we have observed is that farmer knowledge is often undermined. We often say farmers have been breeding crops for so many years, but how are we showing this and how is it linking in the seed systems? So we also try to seek to enhance farmers' practices so that we can contribute to farmers' rights, and we're also showing best practices through research for farmers' rights. We try to strengthen farmers' participation as key stakeholders and owners of plant genetic resources. We want to contribute to conserving and developing crop genetic diversity as well as sustainable use. We want to increase the adaptive capacities of farmers to climate change. I think climate change is now a big issue in most of our countries and in many regions. We also want to develop mechanisms that help farmers to participate in the seed value chain and policy process. We have seen that the current seed system is very exclusive of farmers. They are often at the receiving end of they're often at the receiving end in the value chain. They are seen as markets and not developers in the seed value chain. We want to enable farmers access to appropriate plant genetic resources so that to enable access to appropriate plant genetic resources that are contextual to farmer environment as well as increase farmers' choices. Our experience really was that what was available, whether we go to the breeders on the shelves or on the market, we're not really addressing farmer needs. So we focused on how do we engage farmers in research also so that they can broaden their choices. So one of the things that we really need to do or we do is capacity building, because we cannot do research without capacity building. But capacity building is important to develop skills in documenting crop and variety diversity. And we do this using crop diversity wheels and variety wheels. We also ensure that farmers understand the importance of plant genetic resources and the threats to diversity. We help develop skills to set research objectives for participatory breeding, ensuring that farmers are understanding what it is that they're looking for in crop varieties. We help develop skills in variety selection or development or enhancement, evaluation, and dissemination of these varieties that farmers are researching on. We take 3 approaches in implementing our participatory plant breeding. And really the approach that we use to do research for us is participatory plant breeding. And there are 3 approaches that we focus on. The first approach is participatory variety enhancement. This is just how do we restore crop varieties that have been existing but have lost the traits that are desired by farmers, and how do we multiply these crops. Participatory variety selection, we look at the available genetic resource, either in gene banks, with research institutions, or within the communities, and then help farmers select what is appropriate for their agroecological environments. We also go into participatory variety development. This is where farmers create new diversity by crossing or through bulking and doing mass selection. I will share a few of our results. We have done all these approaches with the farmers, that is participatory variety selection, enhancement, and development. In the participatory variety development, we worked on sorghum, and we were able to develop 7 stable lines of sorghum. So here we worked closely with the breeders in the research institution who helped us cross the materials. How do I point? Okay, here. I hope you can see the pointer here. Yes, here, the first picture here is where we had the crosses, and then here the farmers were harvesting. This was a successful cross. This is a field where, oh, I thought I was supposed to be pointing there. Sorry. So then, we're doing the crossing. We worked a lot with the breeders. And here farmers were harvesting what was crossed. That was a successful cross. And here farmers were actually selecting what traits, what kind of crop variety, sorghum variety that they were looking for. This is a segregating population. You can see farmers doing selections. These are some of the outputs of the selection. That is one of the varieties that the farmers have created. I have 2 minutes. We also, in the participatory variety enhancement, we have enhanced 6 maize varieties. You can see here farmers doing doing a selection of the plants that were showing the traits that they desired, and these are some of the cobs that they harvested. This is just a process of cleaning. So what have been our challenges? I think the key challenges for farmer-centered research is how do we deal with ownership of germplasm when it comes to policy, farmer varieties, and varieties developed through PPBs. In most of our African countries, we do not have policy or legal frameworks that support the registration of farmer varieties, so it is very difficult to take them forward in the seed value chain. I think there's also limited funding to support farmer-centered research. It's a huge challenge. And a few recommendations to go forward. Very critical is to start looking at farmer variety registration, to explore mechanism on how to deal with the governance of farmer varieties, their ownerships, and to support farmers' rights. We need to strengthen collaboration with government institutions for the recognition, to ensure that there's recognition of farmer knowledge and farmer-centered research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet, for such an inspiring presentation. I'm sure there's some questions, yeah. Go ahead. If you could introduce yourselves before speaking, it would be great. Thank you.
Clay Dimjaji is my name. Let me stand. I wanted to, it was really interesting, but I wanted to agree with you that what you are doing is now enhancement. It's not the proper informal seed system. because there's the proper informal, what our fathers have been doing from time immemorial. But this now to me is a semi kind of, it's another level. It's not the traditional informal seed system. Because this, if I look at the way you are doing, you are almost like following the way the formal has been doing, only that you are assisting the farmer in a participatory plant breeding way, variety selection and so on. And that to me is, in some countries, is still happening between public breeders and farmers. They still follow that. But I wanted just to know that it's some level up in my thinking. And if we want to put farmers right in there, then we need to find a way where those that are involved in participatory plant breeding, all of them are recognized through some kind of a law. But I think laws are there to recognize them as maintainers or as what. I think that. But the question that I wanted to ask originally is, I wanted to know how we deal with issues of access at a local level. Because normally when we talk of access and benefit sharing, we normally look at the North versus the South, developed countries versus developing. But now, you as a development partner at a local level, how do you deal with a community variety getting to another community, which is totally different? How do you deal with issues of access there? I thought that is important. And also, there is always where you have regional integration, where you have either South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia. How do you deal with exchange at that level? Access, how do you deal with it? Because I thought that is critical to me. If another community is going to say, this was our variety, but now it's being owned by a community in Zambia, how do I benefit? I'm just throwing this because that is the difficulty part of legislating farmers' variety at national level. Those are the things that we get boggled with. So I wanted them to say something to that effect.
Thank you. Norutando.
Thank you for the presentation. Mine is on the registration of farmer varieties. As the department, we are sometimes faced with, I would call it, two schools of thoughts. There are farmers who believe that farmer varieties should be registered. On the other side, the other farmers would say, no, we don't want this to be registered because it means they will be regulated and we don't want our farmer varieties to be regulated. What is your view in this instance? Thanks. Sorry, I'm Nolutando from the Ministry of Agriculture in South Africa. Thanks.
Thank you, Norutando. I think we're going to run out of time, but maybe the next round. We're going to hold it for now and just, I think, keep the conversation going. Otherwise, we might not have time for the others. So, Juliet, there's some hard questions for you.
I thought we had agreed that no hard questions. I think I'll start with the farmer variety registration. I think for us, the registration is really to create mechanism on how to ensure that there's distribution and dissemination of these varieties. For us, the law in Zambia allows you to distribute a farmer variety within a specific area. So beyond that, you cannot cross. But we have seen that these farmer varieties have got demands beyond the specific area that government prescribes. So we are talking about, we know that these varieties are owned by communities, different communities, and they are in those communities. But we also want to address a little bit issues around quality. And we're not talking about quality in terms of DUS or anything. We want to address quality in terms of maybe, what is this, germination percentage. So maybe that's how I can answer your question. So it's not really to give a PBR to a person who has registered the farmer variety, but to create means through which farmer varieties can disseminate it so that they are utilized. And dealing with the issues of access, I think it goes back to the same. Regional level, there are laws, but we also want to see that these farmer varieties can be exchanged between borders. How that it is done, it is to the policymakers and us to discuss. But at national level, it still goes back to the issue of the restriction within the laws. If the farmers were allowed to disseminate their varieties, like the maize I'm talking about, which is cleaned, they would have disseminated beyond what they are confined to. So we keep wondering why, if these varieties are in demand, why are they restricted only to a specific area? Whether it is more semi or following the formal, I think we're also dealing with purely traditional varieties when we're dealing with participatory variety enhancement. Yes, you can say that the PVD is semi-formal because we've actually created new crosses, but they are not created at a research institute where, environment are very constant and they're controlled. These varieties are created in farmer environment that are very dynamic. So they will never meet the formal requirements for their registration. This is why we're looking for other processes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Yeah, I mean, some really interesting conversations there, which I think we could spend a whole session on. But important around farmer varieties, alternative systems. We had a really nice session last year around open access strategies as an option to sort of a more formalized intellectual property approach. I think that really offers some interesting options. And then the question around traditional breeding and whether, in the context of climate change, that we actually have to start maybe thinking a little bit differently. But I'm going to hand over now to Frederick Sanga, who works with the Biodiversity Conservation Initiative in Northern Malawi, and he's doing amazing work on community seed banks. We were lucky enough, Viviana and I and Regina, to visit him last year, and every seed bank we visited said they got their seed from the seed banks that BCI were managing. They're really doing fantastic work there. Over to you, Frederick.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Good evening. So I'll take you through the work that we have been doing in Malawi through community seed banks and how these community seed banks contribute to the realization of farmers' rights. So community seed banks are farmer-led and locally governed institutions that conserve PGRFA. They also facilitate availability and accessibility to diverse local adapted seeds. Community seed banks also restore, revitalize, and strengthen farmer-managed seed systems. They are important because they empower farmers and communities to gain control over their plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, and thus they really play an important role in the realization of farmers' rights. The farmers' rights, as stipulated in Article 9 of the Plant Treaty, the right to save, use, exchange, and sell farm saved seed is very important, and these community seed banks, they ensure that farmers are able to realize this right by providing a space where farmers, they access diverse seeds as well as planting materials, and also they are able to utilize the seeds that these farmers access. Farmers harvest their seeds and they save their seeds in these community seed banks, and also they exchange these local adapted materials. Through seed fairs that the community seed banks conduct, they are able to sell these seeds. And sometimes they also sell to organizations that are dealing with farm saved seeds, as well as members who are outside the communities where community seed banks are operating. Community seed banks also contribute to the protection of indigenous knowledge associated with the use of PGRFA. For example, as you can see in the picture, farmers at Nkombezi Community Seed Bank, they are appreciating a very beautiful finger millet, which is an important crop and also neglected and underutilized. So they are sharing how the crop was grown, how it was managed. So in so doing, they're also sharing indigenous knowledge associated with finger millet. And on the other side, farmers are also discussing on sesame, how sesame is grown. It is also an important crop, though it is neglected and underutilized. There are also benefits from community seed banks, but the benefits mostly are not monetary, but they are through materials such as seeds, as well as technical support from players involved in the PGRFA. For example, from the National Gene Bank, civil society organizations, as well as extension workers from the government. The community seed banks are also able to access materials from gene banks through the support of civil society organizations. And also they are able to access materials from breeding programs. At one point, we partnered with ICRISAT, which was working on groundnut CG7 variety, and farmers were able to access that material. They were multiplying and then giving it back to ICRISAT. So it's an important space which allows farmers to access these PGRFA. Community seed banks, the members are trained in various policies and legal frameworks associated with PGRFA, and that they use the knowledge that they acquire to raise awareness in the communities on these policy issues to do with PGRFA. And also because they have the knowledge, they are able to participate in spaces that are discussing issues on PGRFA, and that they are now able to lobby and advocate for the realization of farmers' rights. Despite their importance, these community seed banks are facing various challenges, such as the unfavorable national policies and legal frameworks that do not support community seed banks. Farmers' rights are not recognized at national and regional level. And the most important challenge is the sustainability of these community seed banks. We have seen that these community seed banks, they need continuous support for a certain period of time. You can't establish a community seed bank within 3 years. They need at least to be supported for a certain period of time because these are issues of technical. So you want to allow their indigenous knowledge to go together with scientific knowledge, and that takes time. And you want to develop good sustainability measures as well as exit strategies. So it is one of an important challenges that these community seed banks are facing. Another one is low seed volumes at the initial stage, because we are working with low volumes and you'd like to multiply these materials that farmers can access in large numbers, but then some of the varieties, their multiplication factor is very low. So it limits the number of farmers that can access the materials. Limited access to markets, the materials that farmers produce are not recognized as seed by government laws. So it is difficult for the farmers to sell these farm-saved seeds. Then pests, both field and storage, that attack these varieties. Now, this is where it is important to introduce ecological pest control measures through agroecology. So it is good also to integrate agroecology in the work of community seed banks. The lessons learned through our work for a period of 10 years is that a combination of material, technical, and financial support is necessary for the continuous operation of community seed banks. These community seed banks are vital farmer-led institutions for the realization of farmers' rights, as we have seen, and there is need to link them to national gene banks, research institutions, the academia, and like-minded CSOs for them to continue working. And also, an important factor is that these community seed banks, they are able to empower women by helping them to meet their gender laws of ensuring household nutrition security, because women are able to access diverse materials and they are able to empower the farmers. Participation of youth is important, and also access to local adapted seeds from community seed banks can contribute to building of resilient cropping systems, food and nutrition security, and environmental sustainability. So this is just results of germination tests that we conducted just to ensure that farmers are able to access quality materials with high germination percentage. As you can see from 16 samples that we submitted to Lunyangwa Research Station, only one failed. We also do these tests so that farmers are accessing good materials. Lastly, it is important to safeguard local seeds because they are our future. In this regard, the importance of community seed banks cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred, for such a wonderful presentation. And there are some resources outside which are exactly about the cases that Fred's been talking about, and also Juliet's case study and the fairs. So please help yourselves to those. Some questions. Yes.
It's not really maybe a question like the seed that does 72% in terms of germination. You call it failing, or you take it to the field and replant it?
For a variety which has not passed the germination percentage, farmers do not access it, so we rejuvenate it. We plant it in divested blocks so that it is rejuvenated. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. This is Shabnam from Nepal. I would like to, because one of the challenges that you mentioned about the community seed banks, the sustainability, I think that is also an issue that seed banks in Nepal also faces, because when they are trading only the traditional varieties, and then again the issues are same, like they don't have the multiplication fields, and then there's a very low production of the seeds. So normally it's very difficult to sustain them. So how do you, Zambia is, you're from Zambia, right? Sorry. Okay. Malawi. So how you're tackling that thing? Because for us, what we are thinking about is that, because farmers, while they grow traditional varieties, they also go to the commercial varieties, right? So they are growing both varieties traditionally, basically to keep continue with their culture, or for they need some kind of varieties for some there is for some cultural requirement or some food requirement, but they're also growing the other varieties. So we're thinking about that, these community seed banks, while they can do the role of conservation, other thing, but at the same time, if they can also trade the commercial variety, maybe that way they can sustain. So this is how we are thinking about it. I don't know whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but maybe you'd like to hear from your perspective on this.
Okay, thank you. So what we are doing currently is that we have introduced agribusiness to the community seed banks that we are working with. And the farmers have identified value chains which are profitable to them. So farmers, they also pay some membership fees annually. So they depend on whether you come to the seed bank to work or not. If you are a bona fide member that comes and work, the fee is a little bit lower. But if you don't come to work at the community seed bank, you pay higher. So farmers use those resources and they aggregate what is produced, and then they sell to off-takers. And there is one community seed bank which we are trying to introduce an agroecological market through a donor we are working with. The project has just started, and we hope that will also help this community seed bank to be sustainable, because agroecology is becoming very, very important. And we believe that the seeds that these farmers produce are important in addressing nutrition. So if we can increase awareness about these crops, then people can come and buy. And this will incentivize the farmers to produce more. So these are some of the things that we are doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fred, which is why the restriction on sale is so critical. Yeah, yeah. I see your hand, but I'm also aware, but just concerned about time. So can you save your question to the end, and then we can have an open round of discussions, please? So I see 3 hands. I'm going to hand over to Mutinta Nketani from the Zambian Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity in Zambia. And she's going to wrap up by talking about threats to farmers' rights. We've touched on some of them, but she's going to pull all of that together.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us and for staying until now. My name is Mutinta Nketani, and I work for the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity. And we are an advocacy platform in Zambia for sustainable food systems and agroecology. There are, of course, all the work that SKY does leads to the realization of farmers' rights. But there are certain threats that, are inherent in the work that we do, but also to the work that the farmers are doing. One of them is the exclusive plant variety protection laws and policies. In most of our countries, you find that the PVP laws are quite exclusive, as my colleagues have already alluded to. In Zambia, for example, the Plant Breeders' Rights Act is under review to align it to OPOV 91 guidelines. And we know that this is likely to lead to, currently the PBR Act has the exemptions which allows what Juliet spoke about to happen. And those are some of the clauses, I think, that are targeted for change so that farmers are not able to practice their seed systems. And these laws and policies are very critical because they determine the definition of seed, who can legitimately produce and sell seeds, which varieties are available in the market, and which market locations. Like Juliet says, the radius that they are given is about 40-kilometer radius in which they can sell their produce, while commercial or hybrid seeds are actually can be sold anywhere, even in areas where they were not tested. And they also impact directly on equitable access to seed and seed security. Like Juliet says, people want the varieties, but they cannot reach them because of these restrictions. The farmers also lack spaces, or they have limited spaces for participation in decision-making at all levels, basically. So in Zambia, we have what was developed as the Comprehensive Agriculture Transformation Support Program, which was supposed to be the National Agriculture Investment Plan, the second generation of the plan, and ended up being that, and it was developed by foreign consultants, brought to the farmers and nationals to validate in a half-day meeting. And this, it's about the farmers. So it should have been about the farmers also deciding what goes into an investment plan for agriculture. The introduction of GMOs, or genetically modified seeds, in Zambia, the policy is under review to allow for this. And we feel that this is a threat because of contamination to farmers' seeds that they are developing, but also to the fact that this basically consolidates corporate power over our seed system. And like Rachel spoke about in the introduction, seed sovereignty will be compromised. Therefore, farmers would have limited rights. Then the extension services, we have a climate smart agricultural manual that was developed recently, again, fast-tracked, developed by foreign consultants. And there is nothing that relates to farmers' rights. Our curriculum at college, university does not even begin to describe what farmers' rights are, and yet we are here. So this is a very big threat because everyone that is going out there to interact with farmers has no idea of what farmers' rights are and how to then, help the farmers realize them. There's restricted access to PGR. I think this was discussed even in the plenary. The lack of national frameworks, we've alluded to this. In Zambia, we have not yet domesticated and started to implement farmers' rights at the national level. Then we have the corporate-induced monocultures augmented by government policies and programs such as the Farmer Input Support Program, FISP. This subsidizes the private sector. I keep giving the same example when I go to the farmers about how a farmer who's been receiving these inputs, the subsidized inputs for 20 years, has actually been going backwards in terms of development, or they're at the same level. If I got a contract to supply fertilizer today under this program in Zambia, I would be a millionaire instantly. That is how skewed these programs are. And then, of course, the CASP that I talked about, this one again has very limited, it's the whole investment plan under the whole agricultural sector. And it is focused on maize, soya, wheat, avocado, macadamia, Irish potatoes, and onions. And then, of course, a few species of livestock and aquaculture. So you see the consolidation of how farmers will follow the money. And that means that we are losing the agrobiodiversity and, of course, infringes on farmers' rights. Our contribution as SKY to the realization of farmers' rights, apart from everything else that my colleagues spoke about, our contribution is the platforms for advocacy through the seed banks, of course, then reviving the work that is being done to revive neglected and underutilized seeds. This is in collaboration mainly with government. Then advocacy and lobbying against, in Zambia, for example, and I think in Zimbabwe now, pushing back against Zambia joining UPOV, and also, engaging government over CASP and, its limited scope, despite that it's an entire investment plan for the country, and also advocating for the domestication of the international treaty and full implementation of Article 9 and other related clauses in the international treaty. We are also building capacity of farmers to participate in advocacy, but also providing the platforms for farmers to participate at local, national, and international level in decision making. Then partnerships, we have quite a number of partnerships. We are also helping farmers through the extension services for them to farmer-to-farmer kind of extension on farmers' rights, since we don't get that from government extension officers, but also information sharing through seed banks, as was said, and taking a food systems approach. Now, the food systems approach is very key because, like my colleague said, the food sovereignty starts from seed sovereignty, and the food systems approach enables the farmer to realize how their seeds, their decision-making capacity feeds into everything else that constitutes the food system. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matinta. And I think what you're describing is a trend, actually, that we could see replicated in many other Southern African countries as well, in terms of the skewed bias towards the formal seed system. So I know that there are a number of hands. 1, 2, 3. I think any questions specifically for Matinta, we could start with those, and then we could move for a more general discussion. So are there specific questions for Matinta? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Charles Nying. I do not present myself. I work in the Ministry of Agriculture in Cameroon. I'm very interested in the last 3 presentations, and there was something about farmers' rights, which you mentioned in the last presentation, which we don't usually see, the GMO. Yes. We should be very careful, because imagine that if they introduce a GMO maize in a locality, it would finish all the maize varieties that are present in that locality. So I've noted that question, but she clarifies that is a very serious threat. And I think our biosafety laws, we should take a lot of precaution. In Cameroon, we have taken that precaution. We don't allow, even though it's a Ministry of Environment, we don't allow importation of GMO seeds. We don't tolerate it. We have zero tolerance. So I think this is an important lesson for us to safeguard the seeds of community. Then one suggestion that I wanted to do is that if farmers can group themselves in powerful associations so that they can be able to bring out their rights, they'll be able, so that they don't come and just impose to them that this is a variety you must produce. You don't need your varieties, or if they are grouped in association, they will have a stronger voice, which is what I think is lacking in Africa. So the capacity development aspect that they are doing to make them understand their rights is very important. And then my other question is that somebody talked about the gene banks, the community gene bank. Is it really, do we have the means to set up those community gene banks? And is it possible? Because I know in some French countries in Africa, they have what they call OAPI. This, you can go and you register, that's you protect any variety. So if those communities can gather together, they say, I have a Bambara groundnut variety, and it is found uniquely only in this community. So they go to that copy, how do they call it? Draw these people, OAP, these people who are, how do they call them? Do we have them in the East African community? So you go there, you protect your variety. You don't need always to go and that it is a law in your country that will protect. You can go there, you protect that this is our invention from our community, and you protect it, and it will remain there for long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. There's a question at the back. Can I ask that you keep your questions and interventions short, just to allow for others to participate as well, please?
Yeah, maybe this is just a sharing of what we did. I'm Leia Villavicencio from the Philippines. I work also at the Gene Bank there, the National Gene Bank. So we also conduct community seed gene bank, but this time we worked on root crops. So we changed them to community field gene banks somehow. But what we observed there was that we also added value adding at the end of the establishment of the gene bank, CFGs. But however, what we observed there was that farmers tend to select only what they want to retain in a community field gene bank. So eventually the diversity is lost. So once they identify which root crop, I'm talking about taro and sweet potato, that's the community field gene bank we established. But once they have identified, and there were exchange of materials in different provinces, but once they have identified which variety or germplasm they want to retain, given the high value and given the market, given the high yield that they already selected, they tend to discard the other germplasm material. So the diversity that we want to retain as a gene bank within a community is lost eventually. So this is challenge eventually the sustainability of the community field gene. So it's just a sharing of what we have observed in our what we have done recently in our project.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Quick one. I thank you for that, because I wanted to say that as well, to say as you try to make farmers business-minded, they will also lose the genetic resources, and eventually we will be at the ground zero eventually, because once they go formal and they're into business, they will pick the best and throw the rest. But what I wanted to say is that I'm also the culprit. It's not you alone, because I think in around 2002 or thereabout, I also wrote something on community seed banks as we started in Zimbabwe. But I discovered that the major issue when you are talking about sustainability is that the way we have constructed our community seed banks is a borrowed way, okay? We never really did a mapping and really understood what farmers, how they wanted it to be like. Because I remember traditionally in Zimbabwe that our chiefs would have a kind of, in my vernacular, would say Zundera Mambo. And then the chief would have all these. And when the community would go hungry, the chief would then give the community. But now, if you look at the way we have put our community seed banks, it's like this NGO has its own, this one has its own. And eventually, it will be up to that NGO to continue supporting it. Because the day you will move out, that thing will collapse. I must be honest with us. And this is why you see that it's more of us who talk about them. But you don't see the very farmers coming here to say, we have put a community seed bank. That tells you that this is a localized thing. And to me, sometimes we are worried so much about farmers' rights at this level. But remember, farmers' rights are linked to culture. They are linked to tradition. They are linked to indigenous knowledge system and diet. So they are a local level rights. They enjoy them at that level. And no one has ever interfered with seed exchange. I know that my sisters were married and they were given something by my mother and so on. No one ever interfered with that because it's tradition, it's part of us. So I wanted to say sometimes we want to elevate this thing to where it is not supposed to be. Because this is a community, a local level something. And our tribes are different. Our cultures are different. Our dialects are different. So these things operate within that setup. So how do you, anyway, I wanted to let us understand, because sometimes we do this research and we want to really uproot, to remove from the farmers, and we speak about them at this level. Sometimes when people say we are not realizing their rights, I wonder, because I know that at local community level, the rights are there.
Okay, thank you for that. I think our panel might disagree, but I'm going to hand it over to everyone just to have a final set of responses to all of those, or to any or all of those questions. There was a comment around GMOs. There's one around community seed banks. There's one about diversity and sort of the conflict with business and commercial intent. And then there was sort of the last comment now about bottom-up development with regard to community seed bank. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that or respond more broadly. I'm just going to start from Mtinta and then work our way down.
Yeah, thank you so much for those comments. I think they are mostly comments, but I'll just add one comment to Mr. Majaju's, the last comment about farmers' rights being local. As much as farmers' rights are local, yes, but what happens at national level, global level, and we know that we are living in a global village, always trickles down to the local level. One of the things that we have seen over time of implementing the FISP, the Farmer Input Support Programs, is that farmers follow where the investment is going. So even when they do not realize profit from engaging in FISP, even when they know that in the process of using the fertilizers that come with FISP and the pest, especially the herbicides, they are losing their diversity. They are losing their ability to save, share their own seeds. They are following those because it is the aggressive advertising by multinational corporations, seed companies, and also government policy, where extension services is always on them, telling them this is the right way to go. You will find that even without telling them that we are take away these, their rights are being undermined every day. So I think that as we look at the dynamics at the local level and how farmers are enjoying their little rights that are remaining now, we keep aware of the national and global developments that are likely to trickle down and undermine their rights even more. Thank you.
Just to add to that, if you don't know your rights, then there is no way you can claim for those rights. So you must know those rights and be able to demand those rights. And those, some of us who are privileged and we know these things, we have a role to play. We have to support the farmers. We have to raise the awareness. They have to know these things. If we sit down and leave it as it is, then we're going to lose a lot, because the movement of the Green Revolution then will really wipe out all these important varieties, and including the indigenous knowledge that is associated with these materials will go. And we have already seen that some of the materials that we used to have are gone. Even the knowledge that farmers had is gone. It is now that we are trying to revamp these things. So we don't need to sit down. We need to address these things. On issues of agribusiness, yes, I agree with you that agribusiness is one of a threat to the conservation of PGRFA, because what farmers do is that once they see that this variety is highly demanded on the market, then they will increase the acreage for that variety. And in the end, other varieties will not have space in the field, and then you start losing them. But if we encourage the farmers to really promote diversity through agroecology, then we can also try to address these things. We need to promote agroecology in the work that we are doing. Thank you.
I think the interconnectedness of policy at national level and at the global level, and the interconnectedness of the globe cannot be understated. We can no longer continue looking at things in silos and think about localizing issues. These issues are more connected than we think and are more complex. I think farmers' rights is something that is connected to everything, and they cannot only be localized. But to answer, maybe also to contribute on the issue of gene banks, I wanted to share the experience from Zambia. We've also established gene banks, but I think if we are going to start thinking about the element of sustainability, it is to start thinking of how do we start with the gene banks. There should be, in the initial process of establishment, you need to create ownership with the farmers so that they can own those community seed banks. They shouldn't feel like it's something that has been taken to them, but it's something that they have started and built on from over a period of time. It took us a long time for us to establish the gene banks, but the work on conservation, multiplication of seed had been going on for a long time. And it was a request, if it comes as a request for from the farmers that they need a community seed banks, you can already see that they are going to own the process. If you're going to establish a community seed bank and buy the land from the communities, they'll never own that community seed bank. The communities must give, when you give out something, you have a sense of ownership. So you need to go into how do I say, the community contributes, and also whoever is going in to facilitate that process contributes. Otherwise, if we're going to take everything there to them, then the sense of ownership and sustainability is something that we cannot talk about.
Just briefly on the questions of loss of diversity, I think we have to remember that the seed system is actually very much connected to diet, as some people were commenting as well. And so just as at the global level, as Mutinta said, what's happening with GMOs or FISPs at the national level impacts what happens in the local community. So food advertising and consolidation of food processing and all of these modern fancy packaged ultra processed foods also influences what people want to eat in a local community. And so things like the food festivals that help to revive the taste for the foods as well are also very important for keeping those markets available to farmers who want to use traditional seeds and produce traditional foods. And then secondly, I think in terms of the idea that farmers become business-minded and switch to one variety and produce nothing else, it might be true in the short term, but we've seen with some partners in Zimbabwe that in the face of the kinds of ecological crises that come with climate change, farmers might do very well with one variety for a few years, and then there's a hurricane or a drought or something that wipes out that one variety. And those who are still using agroecology to produce diverse crops of traditional products find that they fare much better in those moments, and then farmers start to move back to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brittany. And I mean, I don't think I need to sum up. I think everyone's done that really, really well. And it's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much for attending. It's part of Think of a much longer conversation. But I just wanted to, before ending, say a very big thank you to the donors who support our work. Some of them are here. Thank you, Sweet Bayer. The Swiss Development Cooperation have been a huge funder over nearly 10 years. Bread for the World, Akina Mama wa Africa, Oxfam Nova, and the National Research Foundation of South Africa. So just a very, very big thanks to all of them for supporting our presence here and for supporting our work. And a big thanks to all of you for coming.